The question haunts you at 3 a.m., when the world is silent and you're alone with your thoughts. Why does she occupy so much space in your mind when you barely occupy any in hers? Why do you feel this gnawing emptiness, this sense that you've lost something you never truly possessed? You chase shadows of affection, construct elaborate fantasies from casual glances, and somewhere deep down, you know you're destroying yourself for an illusion. Every unreturned text becomes evidence of your inadequacy. Every moment of her attention feels like validation of your entire existence. And still, you can't stop. In the late 1800s, a philosopher watched men crumble, not on battlefields or in poverty, but in drawing rooms and beneath gaslit streets. They were educated, accomplished, yet something invisible was devouring them from within. The philosopher who observed this psychological carnage would later write some of the most disturbing insights about human nature ever penned. His name was Friedrich Nietzsche, and what he discovered about the dance between masculine desire and feminine mystique remains one of his most controversial revelations. Nietzsche didn't hate women. That's the first misconception we must shatter. What he saw was far more nuanced, far more disturbing. He witnessed how certain psychological dynamics could transform strong men into shadows of themselves, how the pursuit of idealized affection could become a form of self-annihilation. In our age of dating apps, social media facades, and emotional unavailability masquerading as independence, his observations cut even deeper. The modern man scrolls through carefully curated images, interprets emoji responses like ancient texts, waits for messages that arrive sporadically, if at all. He constructs entire relationships in his mind from fragments of attention. And the more elusive she becomes, the more valuable she seems. This isn't love. This isn't even desire. This is something far more sinister. Nietzsche saw this pattern over a century ago, this psychological trap that transforms yearning into self-destruction. He understood that the problem wasn't women themselves, but what happens in the male psyche when confronted with the feminine mystique. What he discovered still makes people uncomfortable today, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you understand the mechanism, you realize how many men are caught in its gears. That's where we go now. Woman learns how to hate in proportion as she forgets how to charm, Nietzsche wrote in Beyond Good and Evil. But this isn't about hatred. It's about something far more complex, the unconscious dance of power that occurs when desire meets elusiveness. Consider the man who meets a woman at a gathering. She smiles, engages briefly, then turns her attention elsewhere. That smile, was it personal or merely polite? That laugh, was it genuine interest or social courtesy? The uncertainty begins its work. In the absence of clear signals, his mind fills the void with projections. He replays the interaction, searching for hidden meanings. He constructs a version of her that exists nowhere but in his imagination. Days pass. He sends a message. The response comes hours later. Brief, friendly, but non-committal. Another message. This time, silence for days. When she finally responds, it's with an excuse and a vague promise of future contact. The hook is set. Nietzsche understood this dynamic with frightening clarity. He saw how the feminine, whether consciously or unconsciously, could wield absence like a weapon, not through malice, but through an intuitive understanding of how desire operates. The less available she becomes, the more he wants. The more he wants, the more he's willing to sacrifice. His dignity, his time, his sense of self. This is where the darkness truly begins. The man starts to change, to contort himself into shapes he imagines might please her. He abandons his interests, thinking they're not sophisticated enough. He alters his opinions, hoping to align with hers. He presents a version of himself that he believes she wants, not realizing he's erasing the very qualities that might have genuinely attracted her. But here's what Nietzsche saw that others missed. She's not necessarily doing this intentionally. Often, she's simply living her life, maintaining her boundaries, pursuing her own interests. The deception occurs not in what she does, but in what he allows himself to believe. The illusion is collaborative, but he's both the magician and the audience. The social media age has amplified this phenomenon exponentially. A woman posts a photo. Hundreds of men project their fantasies onto that image. She shares a thought. They interpret it as a secret message meant for them. The digital veil creates even more space for projection, more room for illusion. The same psychological dynamics Nietzsche observed in 19th century salons now play out in comment sections and direct messages. But let's go deeper into the abyss. What drives this self-destructive pattern? Nietzsche linked it to what he called the will to power, not power over others, but the fundamental drive to expand, to grow, to become. When a man fixates on an elusive woman, he's not really pursuing her. He's pursuing an idealized version of himself, the man he imagines he would become if he could win her affection. This is the cruelest part of the deception. He thinks he's chasing her, but he's actually fleeing from himself. Every unreturned message, every casual rejection, every sign of disinterest becomes evidence not of incompatibility, but of his own inadequacy. He must try harder, change more, sacrifice deeper. The woman becomes a mirror reflecting not who she is, but who he fears he is not. The patterns are predictable, almost mathematical in their precision. First comes idealization. She becomes perfect, flawless, the answer to existential emptiness. Then comes the anxiety. Every interaction is analyzed, every response timed, every silence interpreted as judgment. Next arrives the bargaining. If he can just say the right thing, be the right person, show the right level of interest without seeming desperate. Finally, the dissolution. Either she explicitly rejects him, or he exhausts himself in the pursuit, left empty and confused. The realization Nietzsche forces upon us is uncomfortable, but necessary. The deception isn't really about women at all. It's about what happens when we refuse to face our own emptiness, our own incompleteness. The idealized woman becomes a projection screen for all our unmet needs, our unresolved wounds, our desperate hope that someone else can make us whole. This is why the pursuit becomes so intoxicating and so destructive. We're not chasing a person, we're chasing a feeling, the feeling of being complete, valuable, worthy. But that feeling can never come from another person, no matter how perfectly they seem to fit our projections. The very act of seeking it outside ourselves ensures we'll never find it. The modern man caught in this cycle often doesn't realize he's replaying ancient patterns. He thinks his situation is unique, that this particular woman is different, that this time the outcome will change. But Nietzsche saw the universality of this dynamic. It transcends time, culture, and technology. The medium changes, from handwritten letters to text messages, but the psychology remains constant. What makes this especially painful in our current era is the illusion of connection without actual intimacy. A man can feel he knows a woman through her social media presence, through casual digital interactions, through the persona she presents online. But this knowledge is fragmentary, curated, often deliberately constructed. He falls in love not with a person, but with a digital ghost, a collection of pixels and carefully chosen words. The philosopher leaves us not with solutions, but with clarity. Once you see the pattern, you cannot return to ignorance. Once you understand the mechanism of projection and idealization, you face a choice. Continue the cycle, knowing it leads nowhere but to emptiness. Or step back and ask the harder question, what am I really seeking? Nietzsche's insight wasn't meant to breed cynicism about love or connection. It was meant to shatter illusions so that genuine connection might become possible. When we stop chasing ghosts of our own creation, when we cease making others responsible for our sense of worth, only then can we meet another human being as they actually are. The most disturbing aspect of this dynamic is its invisibility. The man caught in it believes he's experiencing love, romance, the natural pursuit of affection. He doesn't see the prison bars because he's constructed them himself, bar by bar, with each unrequited gesture and projected fantasy. Perhaps that's why this truth remains so difficult to accept. It's easier to believe we're victims of deliberate deception than to acknowledge we're the primary authors of our own suffering. It's more comfortable to think she's playing games than to recognize we've been playing solitaire all along, moving pieces around a board where we're the only player. The woman in this scenario remains a mystery, not because she's inherently mysterious, but because he never truly sees her. How can you know someone when you're looking at them through a lens of your own needs and projections? How can you love someone when what you love is the idea of how they might complete you? This is Nietzsche's gift and curse to us, the clarity to see our own psychological patterns, the devastating recognition of how we deceive ourselves in the name of love. The question that remains, the question that should haunt you more than any unreturned message or ambiguous signal, is this: when you finally stop chasing the illusion, who will you find standing in the mirror?